Hi, my name is Dr. Gail Stern, and I am one of the co-authors of this program. I've been a victim advocate and violence prevention educator for over 30 years, and I'm also a survivor. We designed this program to provide a new perspective on the ways in which our culture justifies and enables interpersonal violence and to inspire people to step up and help when they see someone in trouble. A lot of research and collaboration with subject matter experts, campus victim advocates, and survivors went into the development of this program. Yet as serious as this subject matter is, our program uses a conversational approach to get our messages across. Now, this is not to trivialize or minimize the impact of violence in any way. We use this approach to make the tough issues that enable violence more easily understood, to get people to reflect on deeply held cultural beliefs without shaming them. That said, we know that this approach is not for everyone. Now, your school requires that each student understand its Title IX policies, but if you anticipate that our program might trigger you, or if during the program you wish to opt out at any time, you can be provided with alternative methods to learn the same information. All you need to do is ask for it. The bottom line is that this program is all about safety, and that includes your emotional well-being during this program. So however you choose to learn this information, we hope that it helps you have a safer campus experience.
Hey, I'm John. We're here to talk about interpersonal violence. That's relationship violence, sexual assault, and harassment. Basically, people hurting other people. Not a fun topic, I know, but you and your classmates knowing what it is and how to call it out makes this a safer place for everyone. So let's take a look at your school's policy on the subject. Review this for me real quick and hit continue when you're done. Great. Now, did you actually read that policy? Be honest. Well, then you get an A for honesty and an F for effort. It's important you know how seriously your school takes this issue, but in reality, making you read a policy is not going to change the world, right? And it's not going to prevent interpersonal violence from happening on your campus. Your school realizes that, which is why they're taking a different approach. Click continue. I'll get to that in a sec, but first, how would you identify yourself as a student here? Click the answer that you think best defines you. Then let me be almost certainly not the first to say, welcome! The thing is, college isn't just about learning your major. It's about meeting new people, having new experiences, and generally being a card-carrying member of society. There isn't actually a card. Click continue. As a student, you probably interact with all sorts of folks both online and in person. You have school, maybe a job, and you should have a personal life. Whether it's in school or away from campus, you may encounter circumstances that can lead to interpersonal violence. Now, although we'll definitely look at some institutional policies, the real purpose of your time here is to understand what's wrong and what's right, regardless of the letter of the law. What law are we talking about? By now, you've probably heard of Title IX, the federal law that protects students from gender-based discrimination. This includes how schools define and respond to interpersonal violence. For most of this training, we'll be using a moral lens rather than a legal lens to help break down, how to be a more respectful classmate and person. In addition, Title IX regulations change, and updates may happen again soon. So if you or someone you know has experienced what might be interpersonal violence or harassment or needs greater clarity on Title IX policies, it's best to work directly with your school's Title IX coordinator. They can provide a clearer direction on how Title IX protections may have shifted. They can also share the many ways your university addresses misconduct and provides resources. So, after that info dump, are you ready for this training? That's the spirit. You remind me of me. Bring on the learning. Click continue when ready. So, let's get this train moving and see what you know about these topics right now. Is it wrong to rape someone? Is it wrong to push your partner? Is it wrong for a professor to promise an A in exchange for a date? Okay, so maybe no mind-blowing insights yet. The answers are all pretty obvious. But let's be real. We live in a culture that doesn't do a whole lot to promote respect. Click continue when ready. Everywhere you look, you see messages designed to demean human beings, especially women and folks from marginalized communities. Click continue when ready. These types of messages downplay the gravity of interpersonal violence. That can keep survivors from feeling like they'll be supported if they share their story. It also allows those who are hurting others to act with impunity. Your willingness to learn more about ways to identify, prevent, and report interpersonal violence could end up making a big difference to those around you, including your friends and loved ones. Click continue to move on to the next slide. One of the main reasons is that toxic cultural messages make it harder for well-intentioned people to recognize sexual assault when it happens, which is wild because sexual assault is easy to recognize, right? After all, every sexual assault has one thing in common, which is common mistake, but no. Sexual assault doesn't necessarily involve physical force. In some cases, the person doing the assaulting threatens or coerces the victim instead. And in other cases, the victim isn't awake at all. The one thing every assault has in common is a lack of consent. By consent, I just mean checking in to be sure someone's up for whatever you're up for and respecting the answer you get back, whether it's a yes or a no. Pretty basic. Click continue to move on to the next slide. Now, just to be clear, it's important to make the distinction between sexual assault and rape, even though it may sound graphic. Sexual assault is any form of unwanted touching. Rape, which is unwanted sexual penetration, is the most violent type of sexual assault. It's important to note that other forms of sexual assault can significantly impact a person as well. Here's your school's official definition of rape and sexual assault. See if anything surprises you. Click got it at the bottom. So let's start with the basics. Here's your school's definition of consent. Look at this closely. It's really important. Click got it at the bottom when you've read it. Cool. Now clarifying what consent looks like is important because sometimes when a survivor shares that they've been raped or assaulted, people try to convince them it was just bad sex or a bad hookup. Have you ever heard of that happening? Well, sadly, it does, which is awful because the last thing someone who has been raped needs to hear is that what happened to them was no big deal. A bad hookup or bad sex is very different than sexual assault or rape. Click continue. Let's say two people choose to have sex. Everything's consensual. But turns out there's no chemistry and the sex is, well, less than stellar. 2 minutes later, one's asleep and the other's sneaking out the door. That not so great experience is what I mean by the phrase bad sex. Similar to when a friend talks about a nightmare date night, everyone can identify that night as a bad hookup or a bad match. Click continue. But in either case, no one's forced to do anything they didn't want to do. They can freely choose to leave or stop at any time. Sexual assault is when a person doesn't have a choice. When someone overpowers another human being to have sex by way of coercion, threats, or manipulation, basically with no regard to the other person's consent to it, this is sexual assault. To someone who is sexually assaulted, it feels completely different than consensual sex. It is violating and traumatic. But to some folks hearing the story, it may not seem that obvious. Click continue. Click on the face of each character to see how they described their sexual encounter. Then click one of the two buttons, either consensual or not consensual, depending on whether you believe the encounter was consensual. Nope. A lot more of these experiences than you realize are not consensual. Only this one is consensual. Although it may have been a negative sexual experience, it was still a choice that both of them made. All of the other characters' experiences were not consensual. Not hearing the no is not an excuse. Even though the sex was consensual, taking a video without permission is not only not consensual, but a Title IX violation and a federal crime. Men can be sexually assaulted as well, typically by other men and often by heterosexual men, but also women. Because of stereotypes that men always want sex and should be physically able to stop assault if they want to, it can be harder for men to recognize when they've been assaulted. Threatening someone into sex isn't consent. Worse, trans and non-gender conforming folks are often hypersexualized or dehumanized, which makes it harder for them to get the support they deserve when they are hurt. Sometimes someone can freeze when they're being assaulted. Whether it's due to sudden confusion or fear, trauma can affect how someone responds in the moment. This is another reason consent can't be assumed, even if someone doesn't say stop or fight back. The gist of it is, if someone wants to do something with someone else, it's the initiator's job to make sure the other person wants to do it too. Period. In other words, you always need fully informed consent for sex or any sexual activity. Also, giving consent for one activity one time does not imply consent for increased or recurring sexual contact. Consent is also only present when it is active and ongoing, and anyone has the right to stop at any time. And what is the best way to be more certain you have consent? The more you can do to really be present with whether your partner wants to do what you want to do, the better it can be. Now, what if you know the person really well? Do the same rules apply? Okay, I get why you might think that, but having a healthy long-term relationship with someone doesn't mean they always want to take a trip to No Pants Town. Maybe they're busy. And just because you've had sex with someone before doesn't mean they want to have sex again right now. How do you find out? You ask and respect the response, regardless of what it is. Click continue. So, what about sex with someone who's wasted or incapacitated drunk? That's correct. First things first, here's your school's definition of incapacitation. Click continue. It's important to understand what our own limits with alcohol and drugs are, and never move forward with sex if we're not in a place to make sure the other person is okay with it. Now, most people don't get drunk after just one drop of alcohol. I'm not saying you have to wait 3 hours after every beer to hook up, but if someone is wasted, incapacitated, drunk, you can't get consent from them, even if they try to give it. Also, we know alcohol affects people differently, and someone's level of intoxication can be impacted by many factors. Sometimes you can't even tell if someone is blackout drunk. Bottom line, if you see someone drinking or know they've been drinking, best to hold off on the hooking up. Are we clear? Great. Now, let's turn our attention to intimate partner violence. Let's be honest, any healthy relationship has its ups and downs. Navigating your own wants and needs in addition to someone else's can be hard. This is especially true in romantic or intimate relationships. We can divide these types of relationships into 3 categories. Good relationships, where things are usually positive and supportive. Bad relationships, where things don't feel equal, someone's not getting the respect and care they want. And abusive relationships, where someone's repeatedly getting hurt, sexually, physically, and/or emotionally. Intimate partner violence is often complicated. While a relationship may start by feeling positive and supportive, it can change over time to become abusive. Plus, it can be hard for a victim of intimate partner violence to end an abusive relationship. The same person who is violent can be loving and kind. That person may also be working on their behavior and even admit it's wrong. For the victim in the situation, this experience can feel shameful, even though it's not their fault, so it can be hard for them to reach out for help. People who abuse their partner often assert control over aspects of their life together, such as finances, children, and even their partner's interactions or movements. Click Continue. Take a moment to review what your institution has to say about intimate partner violence, a definition that encompasses domestic violence and dating violence. Click Continue when ready. While relationships are complicated by nature, those involved should feel cared for, heard, and safe. In a healthy relationship, no one should routinely feel like they're walking on eggshells. They also shouldn't feel manipulated, monitored, scared, or abused. So what do you think? Is abuse obvious? I'm going to go through a bunch of scenarios and you tell me if the scene shows abuse or not. Ready? Here we go. Click Continue when ready. Late at night while in a business school study room, Ariana and Bree got into the worst fight of their relationship. People heard lots of yelling and Bree slammed the door as she stormed out. After she was gone, Ariana threw her water bottle at a wall. Is this abusive, not abusive, or are you not sure? I agree. It seems like both Ariana and Bree need more productive conflict resolution skills, but as described, this is not intimate partner violence. Click Continue when ready. When Sophie tries to break up with Devin, he tells her that if she tries to leave him, she will regret it. She leaves anyway, despite a history of abusive behavior by Devin. Days later, he turns up at her study carrel and shows her that he has created a private Instagram account with albums of naked pictures she'd sent him in the past. He tells her he will make everything public if she doesn't get back together with him. Threatening to distribute sexually explicit images of someone without their consent is abusive and illegal, even if the individual consensually sent them originally. Threatening to share them regardless of whether they ever are sent is a form of blackmail and a criminal offense, considered sextortion. Click Continue when ready. Stalking is another form of sexual misconduct. Take a moment to review your institution's definition of stalking. Click Continue when you're finished. Now let's take a look at a few scenarios and tell me which ones you believe would be considered stalking. Click Continue when ready. Tim asked Wendy to download a location sharing app when they were dating. After they break up, he still tracks her and texts her questioning why she was at certain locations. She asks him to stop several times. Then Tim shows up at the school's fitness center whenever Wendy is there. Several other students notice, and Wendy takes out a no-contact order with the school. This doesn't deter Tim. Tim does not have Wendy's permission to track her location or follow her. She repeatedly asked him to stop contacting her and even took out a no-contact order, which he ignored. His behavior is defined as stalking. Click Continue when ready. Sam came down with the flu and their girlfriend Alicia took time off from work to bring them soup and take care of them. Would you consider this behavior to be stalking? Yes or no? I disagree. Alicia seems like a caring girlfriend. As described, this is not stalking. Click Continue. Diego is an online student who receives numerous private messages from his professor, Dr. Rodriguez. Over several weeks, Diego asks his professor in many respectful ways to stop DMing him. Instead of the messages stopping, Diego starts getting calls from the professor. Diego has no idea how Dr. Rodriguez got his number, and he's frustrated and angry. Would you consider this behavior to be stalking? Yes or no?
Even if two people have never met in person, this type of situation would likely still be considered cyberstalking, which is a form of stalking.
Click Continue.
So what would we call the situation if instead of calling and texting, the professor simply makes a lot of inappropriate comments about Diego in group discussions during their virtual class? Then he sends Diego an email suggesting that all Diego needs to do to pass the class is meet him for a drink. Both the inappropriate comments and the email requesting to meet for a drink are forms of sexual harassment. Harassment is a violation of federal law, including Title IX, and should be reported to the Title IX administrator.
You may have experienced it or know someone who has. Just to be sure we're on the same page here, let's review what sexual harassment means. Click Continue. Sexual harassment includes both quid pro quo and hostile work environment. Please review what sexual harassment means here at this institution. Click Continue when you're ready to review some scenarios. Vinay was recently annoyed in anatomy when his lab partner Adam cracked a joke about having sex with their female cadaver. Having never heard Adam say anything like this before, Vinay pushed back, telling Adam his comment was inappropriate. The professor also heard the exchange and gave Adam a verbal warning. Is this sexual harassment? Yes, no, or is it unclear? Actually, I don't think it is, because as described, Adam's behavior was a one-off. For a hostile environment to exist, there would be a pattern of this type of behavior and a culture that finds it acceptable. Click Continue. After 3 dates, a professor asks her TA if they're exclusively dating. Is this sexual harassment? Yes, no.
This depends on your school's policy as to whether a TA can date her professor. Regardless, there is a clear power imbalance in this relationship, which increases the possibility that an assault could take place. The answer is unclear.
Click Continue when ready. Talking about this stuff is great, but it doesn't get better unless we do something about it. And by we, I mean you. Which brings me to our final topic. Why don't more people step in when something bad is happening? If you've been paying attention, you've probably got some ideas already. We know that harmful speech, images, and stereotypes in our culture can screw with our perception of sex and relationships. Screwed up social norms make it hard to recognize rape and assault. Getting past that confusion is a big deal because our best weapon against interpersonal violence is you stepping in to stop it. Think of it as risk reduction. That is, noticing someone in a risky situation and taking action to reduce that risk. Helping people who need help. Simple, right? Well, you think.
In reality, a shocking number of bystanders actually do not intervene when what could be a prelude to interpersonal violence is happening right in front of them.
Let's look at the 4 biggest reasons why. First up, have you ever been too hot or too cold but didn't say anything because you thought it was just you? Right. Thing is, if you do say something, you usually find that other people were uncomfortable too, and they thought they were the only ones. That's second guessing yourself. You feel like there's a problem, but since no one else is saying anything, you assume you're wrong. Adjusting the thermostat is pretty trivial, but when it comes to interpersonal violence, you can't sit back and wait for others to tell you what's okay and what's wrong. If everyone did that, no one would step in at all, which a lot of the time is exactly what happens. Click Continue. Number 2, have you ever known the answer to a question in class but didn't raise your hand in case you were wrong? Good! That's the confidence I'm looking for. But for a lot of people, social pressure is a huge barrier to intervention. Click Continue.
Fear of embarrassment, aka fear of looking foolish, trips us up all the time.
The same feeling that can stop you from doing something fun, like entering that high-stakes karaoke contest, can also stop you from doing something important. Because you're afraid others will think you're misreading the situation or being a buzzkill. This may keep you from helping someone else from getting hurt. Also, sometimes a bystander doesn't intervene because they don't share the same perceived identity of the person in trouble.
For example, in one study, white bystanders were less likely to intervene if they see a woman of color in potential need of help. This may be because of a cultural stereotype that she'll take care of herself.
A stereotype that only makes her more vulnerable. Next, have you ever heard a knock at the door and just assumed someone else would get it? So you're the one who everyone else assumes will get the door. Good move. You get first dibs on the pizza. Waiting for someone else to handle a situation instead of stepping forward yourself is called diffusion of responsibility.
Click Continue.
In fact, the bigger a group of people is, the less likely that any member of that group takes personal responsibility to help someone, which is pretty messed up.
Click Continue.
Last one. Let's say your friend gets drunk at a party and starts dancing on the coffee table. Before too long, she breaks it and spills red wine on the couch. The next day, she's super embarrassed. The host of the party wants her to pay for the damage. Fair? Sure. Even if you get drunk, you're still responsible for your own actions.
Click Continue.
Now let's apply some knowledge from our first lesson. If someone decides to sexually assault your friend while she's too wasted to resist, is that her fault? Right. It is most certainly not her fault.
Click Continue.
What's the difference between breaking furniture and being sexually assaulted? Simple. You're responsible for what you do, not what someone does to you. In that situation, a lot of people, a disturbing number of people, would put the guilt on your friend instead of, the person who actually did the assaulting. This is the big bad one of the bunch, blaming the victim. The thing is, when people hear about something awful happening, their first instinct is to find some reason why it couldn't happen to them or someone they care about. I wouldn't have gotten drunk. I wouldn't have flirted like that. I wouldn't have worn those clothes or been at that bar. Have you ever had thoughts like this? Good to hear, because that kind of thinking leads to the screwed up idea that survivors of interpersonal violence somehow deserved it. Okay, so now let's explore how you might be able to intervene if you witness questionable behavior going down. Let's say you're a student worker and work with Monique, who is a grad assistant. While eating lunch with her one day, the department chair enters the break room. As Monique takes a bite of her sandwich, the department chair hovers over her, massaging her shoulders and saying that Monique is the best GA he's ever had. He jokes that if he weren't married, he might find himself getting in a little trouble with her. Monique laughs politely, but appears uncomfortable. It sounds like Monique could use some help. What would you do to help her? Pick an answer from the list provided. Excellent. Any of the first 4 answers is great. Whether you try to be direct with the chair, distract the chair to get Monique out of the situation, delegate the issue to HR, or delay and ask Monique how she'd like you to support her, the important thing to do is pick an intervention strategy that you personally feel comfortable with based on the situation. Unless you think the intervention could cause physical harm to you or others in that moment, the answer choice E is the only one that's not ideal. If this kind of behavior is not called out, it sends a message to everyone that it's okay, and the chair is likely to do it again. Click Continue. Here's a different scenario. Say your best friend makes an offhanded joke about domestic abuse, the kind of joke where the victim gets blamed because they were asking for it. How would you react? Yeah, because you're cool, right? You're the cool friend. Nothing phases you. So cool. But what if the comment is an earshot of someone who has been impacted by abuse? Look, if your friend crosses the line, let them know about it. You'd want to know if it was you. Click Continue. It's hard not to get dragged down by all that toxic culture. We've got to hold each other responsible when we slip or we won't get better. And the flip side of that is not holding people responsible for something they had no choice in. Now, of course, you're not always going to be there when an intervention is necessary. So what do you do if you learn about an attack after the fact? What's the best thing to say to a friend who tells you they've been assaulted?
It's a nice sentiment, but put your kicking foot away. You getting violent isn't going to solve anything, and it might make things worse. It may seem obvious, but just saying this wasn't your fault is a great place to start. Victim blaming is so ingrained in our culture that victims often end up blaming themselves. Reminding them it's not their fault can be a huge relief. Beyond that, just believing their story is a huge deal, since sadly, there will probably be people who don't.
Click Continue. Unfortunately, survivors of any type of sexual misconduct, from stalking to intimate partner violence, can feel the impacts of a traumatic event long after the event occurs. Everyone experiences trauma differently, so there isn't a right way to heal. In what ways do you think survivors of sexual assault can be impacted? Click Continue when finished. Actually, survivors of sexual assault can be impacted in any of these ways, plus many more. The effects of trauma can be long-lasting, but there are things that we as friends and family of folks impacted by violence can do to help. Active support is shown to lessen the time a person may take to deal with the severe effects of trauma, and is the biggest factor in someone's healing process. So be supportive. Listen without judging, and don't pressure someone who's disclosed to you to do anything specifically. Let them process and talk as little or as much as they want. Avoid asking them questions about their behaviors. But it's great for you to be aware of the healing resources available for them, whether it be professional counseling or medical help. Here are the resources your school provides for victims of interpersonal violence, along with info about reporting an assault. Look through this, copy it, and save it somewhere if you want. Click Continue when ready.
And this is where you can learn how to file a report through your Title IX office if you or a friend ever wanted to do so. Click Continue when ready. Retaliation is not something any survivor should endure. Retaliation is when someone harasses another person who's made an accusation or is the subject of an accusation. Retaliation can be threatening language, intimidation, or discriminatory acts. It can be committed by an individual or a group. Your institution also takes a strong stance against anyone engaging in it. Retaliation is a Title IX violation even when the underlying allegations that triggered it do not result in a finding of responsibility.
Click Continue when ready.
Here is how your institution defines retaliation.
Remember, every person who encounters violence responds to that experience or experiences differently. They are human beings first. They are friends, fellow classmates, athletes, student leaders, partners to others, and individuals who are defined by much more than a violent experience. And most people traumatized by interpersonal violence do a lot to try and heal. Being a survivor is about resiliency and strength. As Maya Angelou once said, I can be changed by what happened to me, but refuse to be reduced by it. Yup, you heard right. Your man John just went Maya Angelou on you. All right, as we wind down our last lesson, I want to thank you for talking with me. It can be overwhelming to have to look at the world in a different way. If you've had to rethink some of your opinions, that's all right. I'm not trying to make you feel like a bad person for the way you thought before. The important thing is what you do next. Even if only you upped your upstander game, your campus would be a better place. If the rest of your classmates helped you out, the whole community would be safer. And if it starts spreading to the rest of the world, you're basically upgrading the human race, is what I'm saying. Go forth. Be awesome. You've got this.